Hello everyone, and welcome to RPGs and More. My name is John, and I am here to talk to you about RPGs. In today's episode, we are going to discuss a system that I put together over a small period of time in order to help facilitate people who are blind or visually impaired using three-dimensional battle maps in tabletop RPGs. Typically, people who are blind and visually impaired have a difficult time interacting with a battle map because it is most often a very 2D experience. We spread out the ChessX map, we pick up our dry erase or wet erase markers, we draw the map, we place our miniatures on it, and there's no tactile indication of where everything is. This gets a little bit better when you start using three-dimensional terrain, because then you've got walls, you have furniture and things like that. But one of the biggest flaws that this system has is when someone who is blind attempts to put their hands onto the map in order to see where everything is, most of those terrain pieces end up getting shoved every which way because nothing is holding them in place. I happen to game for several individuals who are blind or heavily visually impaired, and I knew that I needed to create a system that would be much more tactile for them. And over the past several weeks, I have been devoting almost all of my time to finally figuring that out and then making it work. So, let's take a look at it. Ta-da! There we go. This is a battle map that I put together using various tools in order to allow someone who's blind or visually impaired to be able to interact with it. Now, there's a few key components to this. First, we used a standard plastic pegboard. This is a kind you can get at any hardware store. I happen to get this one off of Amazon, but it is readily available. The next thing we do is we have the terrain walls themselves. These are actually built to work with pegboard. They are made by a company called battleboardgames.com, I believe is their website, and it's called Gridscape. They had a Kickstarter several years ago, and their goal was to create terrain that you could place on the battlefield quickly and easily in order to create your maps and then put them away. In order to create battle maps that are three-dimensional that can be placed and then taken down almost as quickly as you can draw with a dry or wet erase marker. They also have the added benefit in this case of when I place my hand upon the battlefield and try to trace the outline of the room, they don't move because they are held in place by the pegs that attach them to the pegboard, thus creating a 3D landscape. I can see there's a door here, and then there are walls, another door in front, another door here. This one is actually a portcullis. You can't quite see that quite well. And then we come back up here where there's another door. They do move slightly in the holes, but they will stay in place as long as you are gentle with it and not too rough. So it's still got to be a little bit gentle with it, but not nearly as gentle as you were before. The other features, the last feature to this is something that I actually had to make myself because it did not exist before. And that is, you notice that the miniatures on the board are placed inside, on top of the holes of the pegboard. And when I touch them with my hand, they don't move. In fact, I can actually investigate the figure with my hand, feeling the sword, feeling the figure's face with my fingertips. If my fingertips were used to reading Braille, I'd be getting even more information from this. And I can actually understand what the various figures are based upon that sensation, or at least get an idea. And I can tell that this is a big figure with an axe, probably an orc. This is a smaller human figure with a sword on top. And then when we go over here, when the dungeon master explains that they are next to a fire, I can then feel the fireplace that is placed on the map and is not moving around. It's rotating, but it's not otherwise moving. And then they say there's a body of water. Well, now I know this water is here. Now, what makes this all work is a piece that I actually designed myself on Tinkercad. It's the first thing I've ever made on Tinkercad, so it's probably a little rough. Someone can probably make it better. But what it is this white peg that I glued to the bottom of this miniature base. And what the white peg does is it allows you to place the miniature onto the battle board, and then it is held in place. In fact, not only does it work for the miniatures, but it also works for the terrain pieces so that they can also be locked in place. And then you can pick up any terrain you like. These pieces happen to come from the diorama section of a Michael's store. And I've got barrels. There's a cage or a prison cell if you want to use something like that. This is actually purchased. I believe this is made by WizKids. And all you have to do is get whatever terrain you want to use that you would normally use, and then attach these pegs. This is what they look like when they are unattached. It's just a simple peg that you then glue to the bottom of whatever it is you want to stick onto your battle board. Now, the benefit of the pegboard for this, in addition to having the holes in it that allow you to place the miniatures, you can use the holes so that the person who is blind or visually impaired can measure the movement distance. They can use they know that each hole that they reach counts as a 5-foot step. And so now they can use that to measure the range between their character and the enemy. They can measure the diameter of the spells that they are attempting to cast. They can also try to decide if they have line of sight, because they can trace along straight lines between their character's hole and the board and the target to see if there's anything that is standing in the way. And in this case, there is not. Another tool that is very helpful for people who are blind or visually impaired. Well, first we've got large print dice. You probably have seen these before. These are large print dice that you can pick up from Chessex. They are the jumbo dice. Other people have versions available on Amazon. They're very handy if you just need a larger die with larger numbers on it so that you can see it. If, however, you need to use Braille, then I recommend these Braille dice. These are the D6s that you can download from Thingverse. They are created by an organization known as DOTS, D-O-T-S. That organization is dedicated to turning role-playing games, specifically Dungeons and Dragons, into a format that is much more accessible to the blind and visually impaired community. They also have a D20 or 20-sided die. They have an entire set of polyhedral dice that is made to interact, or made to use Braille so that people who are blind and visually impaired can use them. Some of you may wonder, well, why are these figures all gray? There's two reasons for that. One, this was an experiment, and I'm not going to experiment on my nicely painted miniatures when I'm not sure it's going to work or not. The second part of the reason is when you know that your figures are going to be touched by hands in order to figure out where things are, you want to make sure that you're not going to be sensitive about people touching your miniatures with fingers that may or may not be coated with Cheeto dust, because they can't quite tell when they have that, if it's not enough dust to kind of show up when you rub your fingers together. I think most of you know what I mean when I say that. So we've got the dice in Braille. We have a battle board We have terrain with pegs that allow us to have it stay safe on the battle board. We have the terrain here that locks into place. We've got miniatures that have been converted in order to stay solid on the terrain. You can use any miniatures you want with this system. Excuse me. You can use your standard D20 figures, or you can get those larger figures, the more like 56 millimeter sized figures, if you want to use something a bit larger, because the larger the figure is, the more likely the person is going to be able to understand or see what's going on with the miniature, because there's bigger miniatures have more detail. So we've got all those things in play. Now this is what a dungeon looks like, but what would a wilderness encounter look like? That we can easily see, and here I shall showcase another benefit of this system. I'm going to pick this up. Oops! Well, the dice tilted, but the miniatures, they're all still in place. The terrain is still in place. Granted, if you have a big enough accident, it will still spill all over the place, but this is what has been referred to as cat resistant. Not cat proof, but cat resistant. And I would also say it is toddler resistant. And for many of you who love to roll your dice on the tabletop, it is dice resistant. So one errant dice roll isn't going to make all of your figures just crash all over the place. So here we have an example of a more wilderness environment setup. We have a stone henge kind of, or stone circle that has been set up, and I just put this together today. We have two big trolls that are surrounding the outside, and then way over here in a corner, which you can't quite see, I'm going to bring it into the site, we have a Rakshasa who is watching everything go down and getting ready to laugh at the party's expense as our plucky little heroes here in the middle of the stone circle seek to protect themselves from the marauding trolls, or ogres, if you will. Which you can describe them however way you like. I kind of like how they did trolls in Lord of the Rings, which is why I refer to these as trolls. So, this is a tactile environment. Now, if you want to simulate trees, what I've simply done in the past is I have taken these big square dungeon blocks and said, hey, guys, gals, these are trees. And then my players have said, cool, now we know where the trees are. And that's all you really need. Now, you have to be gentle with these, because these plastic blocks will move around if you're not too gentle with them. So I want to I'm hoping I can work with the designer at some point in the future and talk about ways to change these up so that they stay in place a little bit better. But that's a topic for another day. All right. Let's bring the camera back up. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the basic idea here I have presented. There's some simple elements that you can use today, or not today, but you can use relatively quickly in order to make your tabletops more tactily available to your players. And there are fringe benefits to this that actually will work for other situations as well, like the aforementioned cat, toddler, and or errant dice rolling. Let's roll the dice. Ah! Oh gosh, the dice landed in the middle of the table. It bumped the elf figure with two scimitars, and the scimitar figure kind of just rattled around and went right back into its space. And that was even with a big die. So, there's some utility here outside of just the blind and visually impaired community. I hope you will enjoy this idea. The STL file for these pegs has actually been uploaded to Thingverse, and I will include a link in the description down below once this video is ready to be posted. And that should allow you all to download that file yourselves to make use of this. I will also post a link to Battle Board Games, where I got most of these blocks that I used were gotten from Battleboard Games. They also have cavern terrain and circular terrain. It is so versatile, in fact, and so easy to use that there's a part of me that's tempted to use it instead of my Dwarven Forge, because quite frankly, it has gotten more playtime recently than my Dwarven Forge has in the past several years. Well, we'll see where that goes. It can also be used with other terrain. As you can see, just put some pegs on the bottom, and then they fit onto your pegboard, whichever way you like. And then you can custom assign or align any terrain you want to use. Let's say you want to go to the pet store and pick up some terrain pieces from the fish tank supply area. Simply super glue some of these pegs to the bottom of those, and voila! You now have hills or whatever you pick up for your D&D game, and you don't have to paint them. They're ready to go. As long as you're ready for someone else to put their hands all over them. Thank you so much for your time and your patience, and I hope you all enjoy what has been presented. If you enjoy this kind of content and you'd like to see more of it, please like the video, leave a comment down below. And if you really want to see more of stuff like this, then I would appreciate you subscribing to the channel. Again, this is John from RPGs and More, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Peace be with you. Bye-bye.